So we are here for Human Design Catalyst Monday, July 29th, 2024. And the topic that I have today, which I'm always open to others, but I have the topic of the planets. And I was actually going to read a little bit from the Black Book. I may have to turn off my, oh, I guess it's okay. It works as long as I kind of have to put it, here we go. If I put it here, it works. And so, of course, this is Ra's Black Book. And I was going to read what he said about the planets and then also open up the discussion. And I also have a book handy, What About the Planets in Human Design by Jan van den Berg, which is his collection of things Ra said about the planets and some interesting facts about the planets. And and yeah, I think it was a nice text thread we had last week, Lucita, where we were discussing the planets briefly as well. And there was a nice reminder of the planets are gods. I mean, speaking of reverence, I was just saying, before we started to record, that here in Santa Fe, we need to sort of be reverent of the local mystical tradition and so on that's been here for thousands of years and things like nature spirits. Well, similarly, if we talk about the planets, we'd better be reverent about them because they've been here a lot longer than we have and very much are these very important, I guess you could say, yeah, the gods. I mean, they are the gods to us humans. We are the mere mortals, and we are sort of, I think even from the time of Plato, this was known that we are sort of partaking in something, some essence of them. It's not that we are creating all of the human passions, it's that we are feeling the passions that may have their origins elsewhere, these sort of archetypal passions that the gods bestow us with. Now asks, are Jan's books in print? No, I would love to print them actually, but in the meantime, he actually gave me permission. He was the first one to sign on to the Santa Fe Human Design Library, SFHDL, which will soon be at sfhdl.org, but right now it is here, and I'll just share it really quick for people to see. I pasted the link as well. Preserving human design knowledge for future generations. Santa Fe Human Design Library is passionate about archiving and making available the knowledge of Ra Uru Hu and the human design system for years to come. And what was really special about this for me was that we've gotten the blessing of a number of figures in the human design community and encouragement. Lucita has been encouraging, which has been wonderful. I know we talked about this maybe a year and a half ago. This is one of the first things we talked about. And but also I reached out to Jovian Archive at Lucita and Genoa's behest, and I believe I let you guys know that they were super supportive. It was wonderful. I got back the nicest, warmest email saying that they were so supportive of this project and they had the utmost encouragement for both the conference we put on as well as this project. So that was just a huge relief. And I think part of it is that I did make it clear we have a very we're not sharing copyrighted material, we're preserving the knowledge. And so this is me wearing my Human Design Library shirt. I don't know if you see the logo there, established 2022. That's the first year that we kind of had it set up. This is a little graphic. You can see this image here. This is the graphic of this building right here, which was the first place that we hosted it. That's at 612 Agua Fria. And it's a location called Fasciation Space, run by Mike, a little retail shop. And I used to rent it with him. We were co-renters of the space, and then he ended up just taking over the full rent because he had a lot more to do there. But we still host events there. And so we are the founding members, myself and Mike. Which, by the way, Mike will be there at Frenchie's tomorrow, Lucita. I wasn't sure if you ever had a chance to meet him, but he's a really wonderful guy. I think you might have met him very briefly at the post-conference retreat last year, but he'll be there, and he's the host of Overlay, which is a free human design meetup for all levels that meets every week in Santa Fe, and is the outcome of, or the mutation from Human Design Catalyst, which we did for about 5 years, which now has turned into this online event. And Overlay is the in-person one. We don't do any online or anything like that. It's just in Aura. And tomorrow we'll be meeting at Frenchie's Field, which is fun. But yeah, what are some of the things we do? Sharing human design, digital archiving and cataloging, special collections. Here we have an image of a lecture Mike was giving on Magic Square. So you can see some of Mike's he is using a whiteboard there to show some of the different aspects of Magic Square. Our mission statement, our policies, and then here's our first collection, the Jan van Denberg collection. So to answer your question now, you can get his books here. He actually signed a contract with us. It's very exciting for me getting things like contractually agreed and so on. I sent him a very official, with the help of ChatGPT, very official contract granting worldwide distribution rights to all of his material and vowing that he has, no copyrighted material and things like that. And yeah, so you can download, there's 4 full books, and then there's a booklet pack with 4 PDFs. And so you can just click these and they just take you to the download page, just like that. You can download, this is on Ra's work. This is a pretty cool one. This is like his whole collection, his whole biography of Ra. And then, trustees and donors and our logo. Thanks to Jennifer Vanderheiden for making this logo. Kind of fun. We have the symbol of juxtaposition there at the top. So, all right. Well, let's start with information on the planets. I'm happy to open up discussion, but I'll just kind of start with some of the keynotes, and then we can read together some of the interesting things about them. So here is what I have from the Black Book. This, of course, was written by Ra in Frankfurt during one of the first times in his adult life that he was not smoking any cannabis product. He said that he had the most vivid dreams of his life, that he usually smoked so much hashish that he had no dreams at all. But this was a time in his life when he went to essentially write about human design. I think this was around 1991, 92 when he wrote it. Let's see if there's a date here. Yeah, 1991. So he was writing this in 91, and essentially this was his attempt at getting the whole system out into print, He wanted to get the system in print. And so at this point, he gave a very basic, from the perspective of astrology at least, and even from human design, very basic keynotes of the planets. And I do think these changed over the years, and he did develop them in different ways. But we'll just start. The sun, he gave the keynotes of vitality, power, will, the ego, and leadership. So that's kind of an interesting connection there. I mean, it seemed to me that Mars has more connection to the ego, but I guess it is, for at least at that time in his thinking, it was the sun. And then Rachel says, a lot of sober peacocks claiming dream recall. Yeah, he's so proud of his dream recall. He's like, I remembered one. But apparently it was a very powerful dream, actually. One of the dreams he had during his time writing this book in Frankfurt, which, by the way, it was a cold winter in Frankfurt. So I guess it must have actually probably it was in 1990 that he wrote it, if I had to guess. And it was very cold, and he had to keep running down the stairs to put more coal in the fire. He was writing in an upstairs room, and it was so cold, and he had to keep running downstairs to put in more coal, and then he would come up and keep writing, and the paper got completely smudged and covered in black fingerprints. And so when it came time to publish the book, and he needed a title, he just said, well, we'll just call it the Human Design System, but we'll do it all in black. It'll be known as the Black Book. And of course, he loved the color black. It's pretty much the only color, if we can call it a color, that he would wear. He used to wear a t-shirt that would say, I'm only wearing black until they invent something darker. So the sun for him was leadership, the ego, will, power, and vitality. The earth, interestingly, fertility, which makes a lot of sense, the Earth Mother and so on. But a lot of people in conventional astrology don't really look at the archetype of the Earth as much. They might even talk about, the moon as relating to fertility. But he says, no, the Earth, fertility, evolution, which also makes sense if you really think about the Earth as a solitary or single planet, not solitary really, because there are many others, but our planetary consciousness, our evolving planet, like the Earth is what evolves. Its consciousness evolves as the creatures of Earth evolve. The Earth is also the principle of design, interestingly, and the root. So At this time, he wasn't even calling the root center the root. He was calling it, what did he had a name for it? It was like, it's kind of interesting to read back then when he was still developing it. And the center at the base of the spine, I believe that's what he called it. I couldn't find it, but I think, yeah, in the beginning, he didn't call it the root center or Muladhara or anything like that. He said, this is the center at the base of the spine. That was his name for it, was eventually shortened to the root. So, yeah, he considered the earth as related to the root. It makes sense that the center at the base of the spine does have a special connection to being grounded and being rooted in the earth. At HDHD 2022, we had Stephen Rebelito host an aura experiments session where he had all the people with defined root go on one side of the room and undefined on the other. And this was, 70 people total. And so we had 35 undefined roots roughly, or however many it was. I don't know the exact statistics. Maybe it's like 60-40. But the undefined roots were literally dancing. They were so ungrounded they couldn't stand still. And the defined roots were just standing there with their heels in the ground, just solid. So, yeah, Rachel comments that she loves defined root people. Well, opposites attract. So, being a mental projector. The moon, associated with feelings, instincts, change, and the body. So I love that the design and the body are distinguished here. That Ross sometimes would talk about the design side being the same thing as the body, but other times he would actually distinguish the archetypes very clearly. The same with the mind and the personality, which are, or the intellect and the personality and things like that, which he sometimes conflates and other times distinguishes. The North Node is the line of geometry where you are going, and the South Node, the line of geometry where you came from. Mercury is the mind. So again, here he distinguishes the mind as, its own thing. So Mercury is the mind, and the moon is the body. What an interesting connection of Mercury and the moon. I mean, how often, yeah, we say Mercury is mental, but to really say Mercury is the mind, and people do talk about the somatic quality of the moon, but to say the body, these are nice associations. Mercury is also awareness, communication, and mental life. Venus, he gives the keynotes of art, aesthetics, values, and relationships. And of course, this has some connection to astrology. And yeah, Rachel comments, moon is body in astrology. Yeah, people have talked about the somatic quality of the moon, but I don't know that it's just the body. I mean, maybe. But everything in astrology is so multivalent, and depending if we're looking at evolutionary astrology where they have their own understandings. And I've also heard that the moon is the emotional body, not the physical body, which, and all sorts of things. I've heard a lot of different ways of describing it. And
Jonah, can you repeat the keynotes for the moon, please?
Yes. Feelings, instincts, change, and the body.
Okay. Thanks.
Oh no, we lost Rachel. She got mad at me for disagreeing with her. No, it's not true. That's not true. She'll be back. I think she just got disconnected. We need you, Rachel. We need you. She's our resident astrology expert. And I'm also going to just take this opportunity. We'll see if she can rejoin in a second here. I'm going to go ahead and share. I already shared the link for the SFHDL website. It'll be on sfhdl.org very soon. But right now it's just kind of on a staging place. But I do want to share another one, which is Richard Tarnas, or Rick Tarnas as he's known. His Astrology Intro, an Introduction to Archetypal Astrology. And this is such a good PDF. I recommend you saving it to your hard drive in case it ever goes offline. I've saved multiple copies of this because I'm paranoid someday it won't be on the web. This is one of the best short essays introducing archetypal astrology and particularly going over the planetary archetypes. And if we have time today, I'd actually like to read, maybe that's what we can do is this should probably be an ongoing series, but I'll read Ra's keynotes, open it up to discussion, and then maybe read Tarnas's keynotes and or some of what Jan van den Berg has found. But I just love Tarnas's ability to describe the archetypes. I've found that Tarnis, I've seen him speak many times over the years, and I know him personally, and I also know his daughter and former son-in-law, and so I have some personal connections to him. But he's one of the best speakers on the subject of archetypes for talking about the complexities of archetypes. Like, for instance, if we're going to talk about Plato, he basically starts by saying there are 9 different versions of understanding of understanding Plato's archetypes. It's not just that Plato was an idealist who hated the realism of the world, or that Plato thought of archetypes as unchanging, static constants that existed in some abstract place. Actually, there are at least 9 different interpretations of the archetypes. Some of them, which are very immanent and emergent qualities. At one point, Plato says, you can only see the archetype when you're dancing and you catch it out of the corner of your eye. Things like that. I mean, these really beautiful descriptions of the archetypes. So first, I love that Tarnis begins his discussion of the archetypes by saying, no, you can't just make it some simple thing with a single interpretation. And you can't just dismiss Plato because he said they were this and they're actually that. There are at least 9 different competing ways of understanding what Plato meant. Then he also goes on to say the problem with the archetypes is that we use archetypes to describe them. So archetypes always redouble. In other words, there's no pure archetype. If you're going to talk about each of the planets, you can't really say they're masculine or feminine because masculine and feminine themselves are archetypes. So we say Venus is feminine. Well, there's a masculine Venus. Look at the Amazon warrior queen. We say Mars is masculine. Well, there's a feminine Mars, and so on. Or I guess the feminine Mars would be the Amazon warrior. The masculine Venus would be something like Oscar Wilde, the dandy, something like that. But I guess what it now says, this is a computer programming joke. Dependency hell. That's a term from computer programming when you have a dependency that depends on something else that then depends on another thing that depends on the first thing. And yeah, you end up in dependency hell because there's a crazy interconnected weave of dependencies. And yes, that is exactly what that made me laugh so much. I'm holding it in, but that is a wonderful way of describing it now. And I'm really just trying to kill time to see if Rachel can rejoin, but it looks like she's not able to, so we can continue on. But yeah, I'll just say that I guess that's the second point I love from Tarnis, is that something like gender or, sex, male and female, sexuation, I guess is the technical term, itself is so archetypal that it has to be redoubled on itself. And you can't even talk about the feminine or the masculine without realizing there's a feminine and a masculine feminine and all these different versions. And the same is true for the planetary archetypes. That, for instance, Ra liked to say that Saturn was the great cross-dresser, that Saturn was actually a female archetype that was just understood as male. But I think the real answer is that the archetype itself is neither male nor female, but has different versions. And then I guess the last thing I'll say about Tarnis, just before moving on with the planetary archetypes, is that he also said that any particular culture will have its own ability to very clearly elucidate some archetypes and not others. So in Western culture, he claimed, we very clearly understand, for instance, Venus, and we have stories like Romeo and Juliet, or we very clearly understand Mars, and we have stories of heroism. And some of the personal planets we sort of have a better understanding of. But then if you read Western understandings of planets like Neptune and Pluto, we actually have a dearth of understanding and a dearth of good stories and archetypal figures to develop them with. We talk about, for Neptune, for instance, the Greeks had the notion of the plenum and the pleroma and these sort of technical ways of understanding the archetypal realm. But as soon as you go into India, for instance, you have the Maya. And the Maya is such a rich, full way of understanding Neptune. Or you have Shakti or Shiva for these sort of plutonic forces, things like that, of pure energy and raw energy. And so basically, Tarnis's point was that particular cultural vantage points give us insights into some archetypes and not others, and that we can actually benefit from looking outside of the Western pantheon for understanding some of the archetypes. Okay, well, I'm not sure if Rachel will be able to rejoin, but I will just go ahead and continue, unless anyone has any comments on that. But I did paste in Tarnas's 17-page Introduction to Archetypal Astrology, a fantastic text, and one that that really grabbed me and captivated me when it first came out in the mid-2000s. So continuing on, we just did Venus, art, aesthetics, values, and relationships. Now looking at Mars, Ra gives the keynotes for Mars: energy, power, which is a keynote he actually also gave to the Sun, interestingly. So both Sun and Mars have the keynote of power, desire, assertion, and aggression. Oh, here you are, Rachel. We were actually killing time, hoping you would return so we could continue on together, because I'd love to get your feedback on any of these keynotes. So we just picked back up with Venus, which I think we did right before you left. It was art, aesthetics, values, relationships. Mars, energy, power, desire, assertion, aggression. Aggression. So being assertive, being aggressive. And then he uses the same keynote, power, for both the Sun and Mars. Jupiter has the keynotes of expansion, opportunity, and material matters. Right, Rachel comments, mutation, Mars. Yeah, that's a keynote that Ra would later associate with Mars. And she's making a reference to objective personality, which is a fun connection there. Yeah, Jupiter being opportunity. There's a wonderful essay series by James Hillman, who was actually Richard Tarnas's mentor, and it's on the puer senex symbolism. Puer meaning that's Latin for boy, like young child, basically. The puer and the puella, the boy and girl, and then senex meaning older. It's where we get words like senator and senile or senescent. And the puer and senex, this might be a fun one to read in the future because it is such an incredible exploration of what are essentially the archetypes of Mercury and Saturn. Although I guess maybe there's a bit of Jupiter in there as well, because one of the terms that is used in exploring the relationship to opportunity is essentially the goddess Fortuna. That's where we get the term opportunity from. And so there's actually an essay in there. And so the term is the puer aeternus, the eternal boy, or the puella aeterna, the eternal girl. And what is their relationship to opportunity is one of his questions. And he, in classic James Hillman fashion, he deconstructs the term opportunity and shows us some of its archetypal resonance. That Fortuna, the fortune, is the same word where we generate terms like port or portal, and portal being the window. So we say a window of opportunity, a port or a hole that you can get through. Comment from Rachel that Mercury is the puer, Jupiter the port. Funny, yeah. So Hillman says Mercury is the puer, archetype, and that Saturn is the senex archetype. And it does seem, yes, that Jupiter is another name for Fortuna, or Portunus, the goddess of fortune, who brings you the window of opportunity. Continuing on, Saturn is considered with regards to limitation, restraint, discipline, focus, and pain. So these are some of the keynotes of Saturn. I'm not sure how the part of fortune relates to that now. It's a good question, but it's the same thing, right? Fortuna. I don't know if the part of fortune is calculated based on the position of Jupiter or something like that. Yeah, I know that the Arabic parts are all equations, but I wasn't sure if it was like Sun plus Jupiter minus Saturn or something like that. Oh, it's Earth, Sun, Ascendant? That's what it is? See, this is why we need Rachel here. She knows the formulas for the Arabic parts. Yeah, I've looked at my part of fortune before. It's the calculation based on the Earth, Sun, and Ascendant. Very cool. So yeah, while Jupiter is expansion, opportunity, and material matters, Saturn is limitation, restraint, discipline, focus, and pain. And of course, the Saturn-Jupiter synodic cycle was known as the Great Year to the ancients. For instance, in Greece, the Saturn-Jupiter conjunction was tracked, and that was considered one great year. We had a lesser year, which was the Earth going around the Sun, or at that point we thought the Sun went around the Earth, but same difference, the 365.25 day year, that was the lesser year. The greater year was actually every 10 or so years when Jupiter and Saturn conjuncted. And the other interesting thing is that Jupiter and Saturn conjunct in the same element of signs, making a grand trine for about 200 years at a time. The lesser year is our regular year, Rachel. That's just the 365.25 day year. The greater year is the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction cycle. And the cool thing about that, as you may know, as I think some of us know here, that the great year, the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, continued to happen in a grand trine of the same element of signs, and for the longest time, for instance, was in a grand Earth trine, inching along, barely conjuncting, slightly ahead of where it was previously, a fraction of a degree every 10 years. And only a couple of years ago did it move into the grand air trine. So now Jupiter and Saturn conjunct in air signs, and they will for the next 200 years. So these grand trines, right? And okay, so Rachel comments she has a natal Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. Yeah, that was in the, yeah. So it was so what sign was that in? It was an Earth sign, right? Oh, Libra. Okay, well maybe I'm wrong then. Maybe it went from air.
No, I am like a weirdo. Like there was majorly what you say is correct, but like I was the one-off. Like in 1981 there was this weird one-off conjunction in air signs, but
Oh, so
after
you were actually, and now it's going to be an air sign for the next 200 years. So you were
exactly.
actually
So
prefiguring the future. You were like preparing for the
I'm
future.
yeah, I'm
You,
here.
you were a front runner. You're like, this is where we're headed.
I'm a gatherer and I'm here for the future. That's right.
Yes, you absolutely are. You are. Okay, so now let's look at Uranus. And, again, all of these keynotes changed drastically for Rob. By the time he was doing Magic Square, keynotes like, Uranus was the sidetrack and things like that. Neptune, he gave misinformation, a lot of different keynotes that he would change over the years. But at this time in 1990, his keynote for Uranus keynotes transition, revolution, instability, electricity, and invention. And yeah, I have Jupiter Uranus conjunct. It's true. I have it 0.03 degrees conjunct. It's conjuncts once every 14 years, roughly. And I was lucky enough to catch the exact day that it went conjunct. Actually, the third and final conjunct of 83. It was first conjunct in April, then it went retrograde.
That's very strong.
Yeah.
As an
Yeah.
astrologer, when I see that, like people that have outer planets, like I've seen many charts in my lifetime. And when people have, I know they don't take it as seriously because, oh, it's a generational aspect. But
No.
like,
I take it very seriously. I mean, the fact that it was literally only a couple hours before I was born. I mean,
exactly.
I was born with it. Like,
it's the exactitude of the aspect when when you get to those Mars and beyond, like outer planet things, it's the exactitude that matters. So when you have like, and like if it's like very far outers, the exactitude can get like even a smaller range. Like 1 degree is a high level of exactitude. So like,
well, yeah, but I mean, I've met people that, I mean, yeah, like my like, I don't know, someone who's like 1 or 2 degrees exactitude is like Chris Hemsworth. Like everyone born in 83 pretty much has like maximum.
Yeah, but then you also have to take into account like the everything else. Like this is my intuition, masculine intuition. Like you have to take into account like all sorts of like levels of structure of importance. But I will say this, the tighter the orb in astrology, it makes a huge difference no matter how far out or close the planets are. Like if you have the moon, like it doesn't matter, or Pluto, those are the two farthest on the exactitude realm. If they're close, it really fucking matters. Like that is like, I am an orb Nazi. Like I will fucking like always rely on the side of tight orbs, 100%, always.
Yeah, it's a good question on the orb, and you can really. I loved Richard Tarnas's Cosmos and Psyche, even though it's a very dry book, because he does give the timelines, and you can see as the exactitude of the outer planets' nodic cycles comes into exact, precise orb. Yeah, Wait, you're saying Childish Gambino, Donald Glover's the same dude, or the same dude we've been talking about, Tarnus?
They are
I know
exactly the
Tarnus.
same person. That's his like pen name.
No, I know that. That's why I put slash. I put slash as AKA. I know it's the
Oh,
same
okay.
guy. I wasn't saying I'm the same birthday as two different people. I'm saying I'm the same birthday as Childish Gambino slash Donald Glover. Actually, he retired Childish Gambino. He's not going to use that anymore. So he just wants to.
Yeah.
That's his dead
I
name. So I apologize for dead naming him.
that is like my like partner, and all my children's last name is Gambino, so like I'm highly sensitive to that. I'm like,
Okay.
same shit.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I have like a whole 83 file of people born with that Jupiter Uranus conjunction. Okay. Well, let's finish up here on. So we see Neptune now. So yeah, we had Uranus, transition, revolution, instability, electricity, and invention. I like, by the way, that he has electricity. That's something that we take for granted, but it's very much part of our Uranian time, where after the discovery of Uranus, we started to work more with electricity in the 1800s, and basically there's this window of time that we're going to have electricity, and there will be a time after electricity, which is kind of funny to think about. And then invention. For Neptune, he has the keynotes imagination, psychic phenomena, confusion, and drugs. And so, yeah, these are some of those ways of describing it. Rachel's comment that Uranus is chaos out of order, chaos above order. People think of it as also as the higher octave of Mercury, kind of the overmind. If Mercury is the little mind, that Uranus is the greater mind. And then Neptune is seen as an octave of Venus and Pluto of Mars.
I also really think that Uranus and Saturn's relationship are like critical, because they're both given as rulers of Aquarius. And also, like, when you think about how the difference between, and this is in that Planets in Design document by Richard Rudd and Rock. He talks about how Saturn is like the realm of known order, and that Uranus is above that, and like makes sense of all of the disorder of the Saturnian world. And then like that chaos finding order is Uranus's thing. And I agree with that. And I feel that that's also where we're at right now, as we're bridging this time of like, oh, the Aquarian age or whatever, and like we're getting out of the Saturnian like stranglehold of what we would see as the order, and now we're having to like reach into the Uranus, like what is beyond this, like how can we see like a greater order beyond the mundane earthly, what we can see with our eyes, Saturnian boundary, and to a Uranian like greater order that doesn't like respond to this chaos. And this is my observer shit talking to why I love it so much, like the Uranus Saturn like thing of chaos and order. Like I
Mm-hmm.
know that, but yeah.
Well, you would probably also, maybe you already love Bucky Fuller. I think he's another Jupiter Uranus conjunct guy, unless I'm mistaken. I might have just made that up, but he sure seems like one. And he loved to talk about how around the emergence of the Uranian Aquarian archetypes and things like, electricity and science as we know it in its modern form, that, as he called them, the great pirates basically lost their power because their power was based on their ability to use really the power of vision. I mean, this actually has a corollary to what Ross says about tone 3, outer vision, the end of the left variable, giving way to tone 4, inner vision, and the beginning of turning inward and looking at these, as you were saying, this new order. But basically, he said, for Bucky Fuller, it's a narrative of how the dominator global pirates could only dominate through outer vision, through their ability to see farther than anyone else, literally through telescopes and things like that, or binoculars, and through their domination of global trade, East India Trading Company, stuff like that. And that these global pirates, the first world citizens, were able to play different economies off of each other and were able to buy low and sell high through their domination of global trade, and that they were eventually usurped when things became invisible, in Bucky Fuller's terms, that they no longer could rely on sense reality to dominate, and that they lost their power with the molecularization of the world. So kind of a similar story there. All right, so the last one we just looked at Neptune, which Ra gives the keynotes of imagination, psychic phenomena, confusion, and drugs. And now we have Pluto, regeneration, compulsion, renewal, and the unconscious. So that's a really funny one. And yeah, when Pluto was discovered in 1930 with sort of the heyday of psychoanalysis that had only been founded 35 years prior, but it really had kind of come into its own at that time. A real heyday of psychoanalysis and definitely study of the unconscious and of compulsions and things like that. And I just love how all of these planets are named and how they've kind of come to take on different associations. Tarnas actually, long before he wrote Cosmos and Psyche, one of his early astrology texts is called Prometheus the Awakener, and he argues that Uranus was named erroneously, that it was named poorly and should have been called Prometheus, because he argues it's actually the Prometheus myth, which is the archetype of Uranus, not the Uranus myth of the father who devours his children and things like that. But yeah, and Pluto, I don't know if they ever got to the bottom of it. Like, was Pluto named after the Disney dog, or was it actually named after the god? I mean, I guess the dog was named
It was
after the god.
absolutely named after the rapist fucking like underworld god Pluto. Yeah.
Well,
totally.
I mean, I know it synchronistically did, but wasn't it the case that the daughter of the guy who discovered it loved the dog Pluto from Disney?
So,
That was
like,
also
that
named after the god.
example of that dude like being so Pluto like just like excising every vein of his body. Like, he even had to name the dog in the cartoon that had no relevance to Pluto except as an unconscious fucking animal, like the thing. So, like, yeah, no, Pluto has a long archetypal history way beyond the guy that named it. And like all this has it. Like, when human beings like, oh, I've come up with this shit on my own. I'm so DI fucking thinking of this. It's always because they're like tapping into the great collective.
Well,
Like,
that's what I'm saying. It's just kind of funny to me that okay, wow. So I guess the naming the dog character was right after. I guess it's wrong. So Disney named the dog right after Pluto was named. So, but
yeah,
it
and
seems to be coincidental. I mean, it's such an
yeah,
interesting thing. Yeah.
Disney is like really like on the scheme of things very plutonic, because a lot of people think about Disney as a empire as like really negative, and some people love it and they're like, oh god, I love Disney, it's like my truth of what I know to be my childhood. And then a lot of other people like, oh yeah, they're like so fucking like criminal propagandists that have been
Well,
infecting
yeah,
our
my point wasn't really about the literal Disney, but more just that it's funny that at around the same time, literally within a couple months of each other, one of the most iconic dog cartoons of all time was released, as well as, yeah, this planet was named. And it's just so appropriate. I mean, I love the divine synchronicity where Pluto is such a, Pluto or Hades, right, is such a appropriate archetype here. And even the direct translation as riches is what Pluto means, right? And then Ricky says they originally wanted to name Pluto George. The planet or the dog? The planet? Oh my word. Imagine if we had a planet named George. That would not quite work.
I think it must have been the cartoon character, but that is so like
It
unique.
was after the king of England, I think.
The planet or the dog, though?
The planet.
Yeah, that's how I interpreted that. Is like we would have had a planet named George. Like that would have been. It's like we have Bill, we have George, we have Mary. Like I don't know. That would have been a little bit not quite as I don't know. Not quite as profound.
That would have been highly plutonic by George's part.
I do want to mention also, just now that we're on this topic, there's an incredible anime TV series called Pluto, which is one of the best anime I've seen in years. It's on the level of something like Akira or Ghost in the Shell or some of these iconic classic Japanese animations, or anything by Miyazaki. Highly recommend Pluto. It's incredible. I still haven't finished it actually, but it's really, really good. And I think it's on, HBO or Netflix or something. Okay, well, so I think we can wrap up what Ra says. He even says as a note, this is perforce a very basic list, but it is sufficient to give you the general significance of the planet's effect on interpreting a gate. So he's kind of saying, like, there is a way to interpret the gate in terms of these keynotes. Like, you know, where is that person's Mercury? I have design Mercury 45.3, personality Mercury is in 64.6. So you could say I have a third and sixth line mind, although of course we also associate head and ajna with mind. So usually in human design we wouldn't say it that way. But you know, at this point anyway, Ra was experimenting with trying to classify what someone's mind is like, or what their body is like, or what their aesthetics are like, and so on, through the blending together of the keynotes and planetary archetypes. This would later be modified, and obviously with the addition of the exaltations and detriments, we begin to have a new way of understanding the planetary influence on the body graph. But it's still something interesting that we do. At this year's HDHD, Mike is doing a workshop on personality Venus. He actually did this last year as well. It was just so popular, he's going to do it again. And he did a really great workshop where he looked at people's personality Venus gate and line, and looked at it in terms of its as the keynote of the standard and what standards people have. So maybe we could even do that next week. That might be a fun thing to do as a special catalyst, to just go through, you know, personality Venus lines for people and try to interpret them in terms of personal standards. Mike's premise, which I hope he isn't mad at me for taking, but I don't think he would be, because this is very much part of Ra's research as well, is that the personal planets and like the personal things, like the personal standard, is meant to be to apply only to yourself and not to be generally applied to others. But the personality Venus is where we can get triggered by others for not living up to our standard. So if you have personality Venus in a place that is logical and someone else is being illogical, you can expect them to be logical and be annoyed when they're not. If it's in a tribal thing, you might expect them to be supportive and be annoyed when they're not. And part of the growth is learning, no, I have this personal standard, but that doesn't mean that everybody has to live up to that. Yes, Rachel.
Yeah, I heard this thing from Mike on a video that you guys did and put on YouTube a long time ago about how Venus in the personality represents your own personal values, and how you should not confuse them and conflate them with like collective values. And that fucking blew my mind. I was like, oh my God, this is so powerful. This is such a great like piece of information, because yes, I do that. When I looked at my own Venus, I'm like, holy shit, yeah, I really do fucking.
Yeah, I expect every human being alive to live up to this standard, and if they don't, I'm disappointed in them. And then it's like, why am I setting myself up for disappointment? I mean, unless they
Right.
happen to have that same
And
placement, they're going to have a different standard than me.
and then when I realized like, oh shit, that's just like me, and like I don't really need to project that out unconsciously onto everybody else, I was so relieved. I was like, oh shit, I have, I think, 33.1 Venus, and I'm like, oh yeah, like not everybody wants to hide off and avoid and thinks that's valuable. Like like not everybody is a total fucking hermit and thinks that's like the best thing in the world. Like, okay, I agree. Like, yeah, I could see how like this is me, like, and like I like secretly was hating other people based on my Venus. Like I was
Yeah.
secretly,
Well, we can be so triggered. Yeah, you could be like, what's wrong with you? You're not reflecting on this. What's wrong with you?
yeah,
You're not
not just
withdrawing from
not
this.
just
Yeah.
like what's wrong with you, but like you're a piece of shit. Like why don't you fucking think a masculine intuition? Like you're a fucking asshole. You're a piece of shit. Why don't you value this? Like what is your problem? And then so when I was like clarified by that, I was like, and Mike said in his talk, he's like, it's so important that you don't apply these personal Venus personality values onto the collective. That is where people get fucked up. I'm like, thank you. This is so fucking helpful, because I've been doing this to my like dismay and chagrin for like a long time, and it is so helpful. So now when I realize, oh yes, these are my values, and like it's important for me to be true to them. And when
Yeah. Hold
I,
yourself to that standard, not necessarily
yeah, and when,
others. Yeah.
exactly, and when I am like this, I feel good. It's like very positive. And then when I realize, oh okay, other people have other values, and when they do them, it's great for them, and like what are their values that I need to be aware of. It's like so much more helpful.
Yeah, I love the Magic Square keynotes too, because we can start to see how the standard on the personality side is literally complexion, your skin complexion on the design side. So your design Venus sort of imposes its own rule. And if you don't follow that, your skin doesn't glow and you kind of break out and things like that. And so it's literally like, how is the personality's skin complexion almost like it's comportment. Like there's complexion and there's comportment. And I don't know, just having a healthy relationship to the personality Venus and holding ourselves to that standard, maybe, but not expecting everyone to follow it. We did cover all of the keynotes here. We have a couple directions we could go. One would be just open up any general comments or discussion if anybody has any discussion. The other would be I thought about reading Tarnis's Intro to Archetypal Astrology descriptions because they are just so rich and I just really love them. I mean, they're very. We could also save those for next time. Does anyone have any way they'd like to go with this? I mean, I guess the third choice would be reading some from Jan van den Berg's "What About Planets in Human Design" text. So, and if anyone has any. Oh, and then now says, is that you and Rachel share a design Venus in 51 too? Yeah, and then Rachel says she's had problem skin her whole life. Well, I mean, 51 too. Knowing is that about knowing when no amount of courage will work? Is that also about knowing when to withdraw? Is that kind of similar? Are both of your Venuses in like withdrawing lines? Yeah,
I don't know.
51 2 is literally called withdrawal. That's so great. Both of your Venuses on both
Me and
sides have the theme of
are so
withdrawing.
similar. Like now and I are very similar on a lot of lines, and it like very like not just this either. There's other things too. I'm like now is like my secret fucking cosmic twin. Like now and I can't wait to meet in real life with now.
We should
Like
see
when now
if
and I
you two are probably pretty close to being opposites in the objective personality system. You might be
I
each
know.
other's
So when
dual.
now and I meet in real life with all our design and human design like strengths and like OPS differences, we're gonna like actually explode in your living room, possibly, Jonas. So are you prepared for
Spontaneous
that?
combustion, yeah, spontaneous aura combustion. Hopefully, just at the aura level. Okay, well let's read. I'll do a little sneak peek of what about the planets in human design, and then maybe you can read Rick Tarnis's Astro Intro, and sort of open it up for discussion if that's cool with people. And just jump in any time because I'd love for this to be kind of a discussion of the planets and be a little more free form. I'm just going to start with what about planets in human design. This is the text. You can download this from the SFHDL website. I'm just going to post in the table of contents here in the chat. And yeah, we'll just kind of see. Oh, I guess he starts with giving the keynotes from, I believe, Ra and Rudd's book on the planets together. So these are, let me paste that in. These are, I guess, shortened keynotes. And these are sort of the standard keynotes. Like the ones I was reading from the Black Book kind of changed a little bit and became more dialed in. And by this time, Ra's thinking is that the sun is the personality. He no longer calls Pluto the unconscious. He no longer calls the Earth the design, or the Moon the body, or Mercury the mind. Although it is interesting to me that we really do have personality, design, mind, body. We're getting all, and I mean, it's really getting all of the, and unconscious, I guess, even, all these different terms that he would use in different ways. But okay, so at this point, Ra is saying the sun is the personality, Earth is the grounding and the balance, which makes a lot of sense to me. Moon is the drive. This was a really interesting one. I remember when I first read Ra talking about, or actually heard him in a lecture talking about the moon as drive, I was kind of like, what an interesting thing, like the focus or the drive. It is kind of like a focal point. Like if you think about how the gravity of the moon is pulling everything towards it, it's kind of making this focus point as it goes around the Earth. Wherever the moon happens to be the focus of the Earth at that given time. So the whole Earth is focusing on the moon. All of the, the tides are going towards the moon because of the gravitational pull. So it's pulling the water away from the distant reaches and towards the apex where the moon is. Yeah, it's directing. Rachel comments it makes sense to her. The moon is flowing, driving, moving. Yeah, and of course, when you're digging a well, you want to do it when the moon is closest. Which, right? It's like the moon being, yeah, you want to do it at the right time for the. Is it a full moon? I guess. Yes, Rachel.
So to me, coming from my astrology background, which is much longer than my human design background, like the moon represents the environment. Like the Hellenistic, which is the ancient astrological Western tradition that I have studied, is moon is all about environment. It's all about like the other than you. And so like when you think about like, and this is for me as a mental projector very obvious and clear, like that the other really does dictate what happens. It's like the outer really does have much more of an influence. The environment does have a much greater, and I also have moon on the ascendant, so like I'm a very outer influenced person in a certain kind of way, like based on all my whatever systems. And so like the moon for me, the driving force, like it's not what you really want to do. It's really what is like running the whole fucking show. It's like it's like, so the moon represents like the tides and the gravity and the flow of the, it's like a mag, it's a magnet point for the core of the earth that is like the closest in it. Like it's so weird the way the moon works. It's like off the core of the earth, but in itself it's like trajectorying based on not self. It's so weird. Like the moon's power is totally based on the other and its relationship to it. So it's the driving force. It's like it's driving something other than the self. It's like it's a driving force because of its relational, like everything to whatever it else is. So the moon is to me always based on the other, the environment, the what we're contextually dealing with, and how that it's always E. The moon is always E, not I.
Yeah, I mean
Basically,
it's the binary, right? If the sun is sort of the thing that's always been worshipped and the stand-in for the self and kind of the symbol of the self, then the moon is always
the
the other.
sun is always I. The sun is always I, and the moon is always E.
Hmm. Yeah, that's something. I mean, Carl Jung, of course, wrote a lot about sun worship also, and about the study of the sun as the symbol of the self and things like that. And yeah, of course, I was trying to get the data on it. So obviously, the moon is not closer to the Earth when it's a full moon. That's why I was kind of like, so why does the full moon make a difference? Like, why do people dig wells during a full moon if it's not actually closer? It's only it's a super moon if the moon happens to be closer at the. Well, no, it's not that the full moon. It's its own cycle. The full to new moon cycle is an independent cycle of the proximity of the moon to the Earth. When the moon happens to be closest to the Earth during a full moon, it is called a supermoon. But in any case, there is lore that you're supposed to dig a well during a full moon. I don't know why, but also that you're supposed to dig a well when the moon is closer to the Earth, because I guess the water
It's
gets
because
pulled up more
of
easily.
the water traje yeah, it's because of the way that the lunar position has an effect on the water in the earth.
Right, but the
And
full moon's not closer than the new moon. It's really just
no,
you're
it's
supposed to do it when it's.
further. So the
Well, it's
polarity
not.
of,
It's not further either, though, is it?
well,
Because
there's
isn't it
there
completely independent? Isn't the
no, it's
proximity
not. What you're
really?
dealing with is a horizontal and a vertical trajectory with declination, and the other thing, which is what we think of in astrology, which is the opposite of declination. Like I can't even remember the word for it, but it's like
Right ascension.
the super moon thing happens when the declination is very close, but the full moon or new moon happens upon, like it doesn't matter. So when the new moon, the sun and the moon are together, and the full moon, they're opposites. So what that creates is a polarity situation in the driving force and the solar force. And so it's like this potential of the most I hate this, I'm going to say this, but excrementing like force. It's like shitting out force. And the nodes also have to do with this shitting out thing with the south node and the taking in thing with the north node. And that those are all related to the sun and the moon too. It's like,
Well, the
are we,
nodes are called the head and tail of the dragon. So, I mean,
yes, and
there is some,
exactly. South node is
yeah.
shitting out, north node is constantly eating.
Okay,
So it's like
well, yeah,
binge.
no, I love this. I do want to point out really quick though, just to be clear, the full moon, new moon, you're absolutely right. It has to do with the sun Earth position. The new moon is, of course, conjunct and the full moon's opposite, but that is not the distance of the moon to the Earth. That is its
No,
own.
you're right. That has to do with
Yeah,
declination. And
yeah.
also, Ricky
Sorry, but
just
that's
said,
its own thing. Yeah, and that's what Ricky's commenting also. Yeah,
and
the
so
apogee
when we
hybrid.
have both that's when we have the eclipses. That's what makes an
Yeah.
eclipse.
Yep. And also, and also like supermoon happens to be when they just happen to, when the full moon happens to be also when the moon is closest. And you can see this graphic here is showing the difference in perceived size from when it's closest to further away, which
And
is
that also
apogee or
has to do
perigee.
with
Yeah.
when it aligns to the nodal axis. So when we interpret that, like when we understand on a metaphysical level, what does it mean, the nodes and the sun and the earth? It's really about when our solar and lunar, whatever that means for us, most aligned with the trajectory upon our earth portal, which is what the nodes are. That nodal shit is about like the tube of influence that flows onto the earth. That's my opinion. That's, you can take it or leave it, but really the nodes are about a portal of influence. Yeah.
That's a
And
beautiful way of putting it. No, I completely agree. Yeah.
yeah, and they're created by the sun and the moon. Those two, that like the nodes are never like not created by those two planets. Like they don't have anything to do with anything else.
Right, because yeah, it's the sun, it's the Earth's orbit around the sun intersecting with the moon's orbit around the Earth. That's a great way of understanding it, and yeah, and then Ricky says when the sun is close to nodes, the eclipses happen. Shadow casters, yeah, yeah, and as we've talked about before, and as people might be familiar in human design, the nodes are the only activation in the body graph that do not have a heavenly body associated with them, or an earthly body, I guess, in the case of the Earth, but there's no entity filtering them. So, in that sense, they are the purest, most direct. Um, yeah, you can say the nodes are theoretical, sure, but yeah, they're just the most direct activation from the neutrino stream. They're the points where the neutrinos not being colored or filtered by any third party. There's no intermediary. There's nothing in between the neutrinos coming in and their impact directly on us. And then Rachel comments, they are Maya. They are what we think is the portal. Yeah, but it's definitely, they're like the easiest in some ways to obviously notice when the nodes shift. Like this last nodal shift, I met up with Michael Steenbeck Litvin, and we met at the Santa Fe Plaza because it's always nice to be around a lot of people during the nodal shift. And as a joke, Mike told me to meet him in front of Maya Gallery. So we met right in front of the Maya Gallery to watch the nodes shift and had a coffee and tried to listen in on conversations. And essentially the nodes moved into fear of authority is one of the things. Oh, we always notice things. Yeah, the question from Rachel, did you notice anything? Yeah, we absolutely notice things. Why be around lots of people? Ricky's question. This was proposed by Ra. He said anytime the nodes shift, go to a large area. He used to do this with his students. And, one time during one of his Ibiza events, they had a nodal shift. So they went out to be in a huge crowd, and you just notice the hush and the stillness go over the whole crowd. It's like all of the talk, and then all of a sudden, right on the dot, not only do you feel the shift, but you notice the shift. We actually did this at HDHD 2022. We made a little documentary film about it, and it was so funny to watch. Like, it basically went into individual direction gates at that time, and suddenly everybody went off their own way, and the entire group got lost, and people were like walking into each other. Like, it's like one of those movies where the guys are carrying the big glass window pane and the person walks into it. It was like that. It was like slapstick. The whole world became slapstick. In this case, we went into 1718, so we started hearing lots of opinions and lots of fear of authority. The cops were there kind of walking around almost as if they unconsciously knew that they needed to enforce the fear of authority. And people were worried about jaywalking in front of them, I was like, oh, we can't jaywalk. They're looking right at us. And it's like, we're at the plaza. Who cares? I mean, there's no real cars around anyway there. And Mike's like, yeah, you're not usually afraid of authority. It's like, okay, you got me. And people started to like be really nervous. And yes, so you have your hand up, Rachel.
Yeah, so I definitely think that the reason why the nodes are more observable with the herd versus the individual is because they are more collective based. Like when you look at the inner planets, the sun, the moon, the everything like below Jupiter, like you will more see the influence on the individual level. And when you look at the outer planets, you'll see more the outer influence. It's like there are some things which affect us personally more strongly, and there are some things which affect collective more strongly. And the nodes and their shiftings always are much more collective. Like I will notice all the time, like, and I see people with same nodal configurations being like driven along the same like general big like lines, and like the specifics are always seen in like the personal planets and like the ascendant and like the weird aspects that are unique to the individual. But when you look at the nodes and when you look at the greater influences, like these people are like tuned into a greater reality that they are a part of, that they feel individually like interested in. And it's
Yeah.
very like obvious in a certain kind of weird way that I can't really describe well right now. So when the 1718 happened for me personally, the correction emphasis, my whole life like was dramatically changed because like my sister and brother-in-law came and they fixed my whole kitchen. They correct a lot of shit that was fucked up for me for a long time. They actually came in 6 line, did the shit that was like revolutionarily like fixing to like my real life problems that were like, it really changed my life. And I've been like on a high still from that reality change that they did. So a lot of things that have maybe look in your own life. Has anything really changed physically? Like splenic is so physical, and like I really think the spleen is like highly physical. Do you agree? Anybody else?
Yeah, no. This I see. Spleen is physical, ajna mental, solar plexus emotional, and then the G center is more what we would call spiritual. So yeah, I mean I also I see like there's the nodes to me are still mundane because they're if we look at the speed is kind of between Jupiter and Saturn, um, but they are more collective than the personal planets. They're kind of like in between, right? Like I see they're right between Jupiter and Saturn. So they're still kind of mundane. They're environmental. Ra called them the horizontal. He said that the sun Earth is the vertical and that the nodes are the horizontal. And this was, of course,
Exactly. So
his
like
classic.
the
Yeah.
nodes are very much the trajectory, like the actual stage that we live upon. So when the nodes change, all of our horizontal reality that we are like on the stage of changes. And that's why it's such a big deal. That's why we can see the difference, because like yeah, our vertical trajectory is super personal. It's different for each of us as we're walking along the earth. Think about that. As an individual walking along the horizontal plane, there's a million different verticals, but there's one stupid ass horizontal that is like for all of us, and that's the nodes. That's why when we incarnate with stupid ass other fuckers that have our same nodes, we have a similar karma. That's like, even though we're so different from these other fuckers that have our nodes, we have the same stupid ass mission, but a different trajectory from reaching that mission.
Or the
So
same
when,
environment. I mean, the mission is kind of the sun, the nodes, right? And you think
yeah,
that the
the
missions are
mission
much more
is the sun,
precise. Yeah.
exactly. And the nodes is the field, is the environment that we have to do
Yeah.
this mission within.
I have a little comment on this, and I'd love to also open up if anyone else has any comments. But my comment here is something that I started to kind of realize with the nodal gates versus the sun earth gates. Your sun gate is 5.7 days, your nodal gate is on average 3.5 months. So we're born into a cohort of people where for 5.7 days, we're born into people that have similar life purpose to us, the purpose being that personality sun. I mean, obviously different lines, different colors, tones, bases, but ultimately similar purpose for about 5 days at a time, 5 to 6 days. But we're born to a similar environment for about 3.5 months as other people. Now, what really blew my mind here was a combination of two things. One was the work of Steve Rhodes, where he points out that the nodes are what we are attracted to, but also, and I would say perhaps erroneously, what we idealize and strive to become. And my own addition to this is that with self-love, we stop trying to be our nodes. We disidentify with our nodes. Yes, that's a characteristic of us. It's a part of us that interfaces with the outside world and the environment. But in some sense, the nodes are the part of us that are the environment. And when we identify them, when we identify with them, we essentially confuse our nodes for our Sun Earth. So it's almost like if your Sun Earth tells you your real purpose, your incarnation cross, your profile, your true role in the collective, most people don't identify with that. They identify with the nodes, which they share in common with a lot more people. So they become a lot more part of the undifferentiated group of people that they identify with, the 3.5 months of people that all get clumped together into the same thing. And so it really blew my mind realizing that the nodes are really there truly to be who we are drawn to and attracted to, and where we are drawn to, and what we're drawn to, what we need to be around, not our purpose, like not our point. And I think self-love is really necessary to stop trying to be the nodes and realize that that's what we're meant to love. Not like we're meant to love ourselves, and we're meant to be attracted to the people that match our nodes. Like if you have the same line in your Sun Earth as my nodes, or things like that, or even the same gates sometimes, but not that we need to be that per se. Yes, you have a comment, Rachel, or question?
So I have my only definition in the 1156 from the North Node in 56 and 11 Neptune. So basically, it's like such a shitty ass definition. It's like
there are no bad definitions, Rachel. I'm gonna disagree with you right there.
It's like, because Neptune is like, oh, where you have Neptune defined, it's not really clear. It's like you always be veiled. It's like, all right, thanks, asshole. And then it's like the nodes, you can't identify with the nodes. And it's like, all right, so I'm a mental projector with no inner authority, and I can't identify with my fucking definition as it is. It's so like frustrating. So I'm like, okay, so what does this mean?
But I think we're not supposed to identify with our definition. I think that's the problem. When people are like, I'm a projector, you don't get it, you're not a projector, that's identifying with definition. It's not good. Like, we're supposed to identify with our sun because that's the purpose that we incarnated
sun
for
is an
fulfilling.
undefined. So my sun is 39.6 in an undefined root. So am I supposed to identify as like a freak?
That's what you're here to do. You're here to provoke people. You're here to provoke the
freakish,
spirit.
provokish asshole. Like, that's
I wouldn't use that last word, but I would say that you are here to provoke people, and through your sixth line wisdom and being a sixth line role model, and kind of having been above it all and then re-entered into life, or eventually, not yet. You're still in your roof phase, so you're still like in that voyeuristic. You're like the voyeuristic, provocateur right now. You get to be the real back in the world provocateur in 20 years. But,
so what I'm thinking though is that whatever we have as a definition, no matter if it's like Neptune, actually the one thing that's really interesting, and when I'm like researching my family members, a lot of my children have also one of their definitions with Neptune North Node. And I'm like, oh shit, like what is this repeated pattern with Neptune North Node? That's so weird. Like, what does this mean? Like, what does the Neptune North Node channel like want to like tune into? Like, what does my own Neptune like? Because I'm like masculine, like I'm thinking of all my other shits like pulling into this, but I'm like, yeah, like Neptune North Node, like I want to take in all these other stupid ass systems and like figure them out, and like with a very Neptunian like other focused lens, like apply them to other people, not me. I'm a mental projector with Neptune North Node 1156. It's like, how can I help other people by like the collective understanding and then like tuning it into this place and time? Like, how can metaphysics help these fuckers now? Like these struggling ass motherfuckers on this earth plane right now. Like, how can I help them? Like, it's very like Neptune North Node for me is like, how can the collective be served now? Like, for me, that's what I think.
Yeah, maybe and I like this interpretation because yeah, you are like, I mean, and Neptune is obviously very connected to the Maya, very connected to the collective. Let's look at next week. I think we can wrap up for now, but let's continue with planets next week and look at what some of our definitions are formed by. I've actually met people who have definition formed by the same planet on the personality design side. Like they're like, yeah, I'm a 4426 with personality Mars connecting to design Mars. I'm like, whoa, okay. Like you see some pretty interesting configurations. Personally speaking, I have my personality Sun connected to my personality Venus. That's one side of my definition. And then I have my design Sun connected to both personality and design Jupiter Uranuses. Well, my personality Jupiter and design Uranus. So, but yeah, it's my suns. I have two channels, and one's my personality sun and one's my design sun. So my life force energy is very connected to the fulfillment of my purpose. That happens to be the case for me. I also happen to have all four of the configuration, all four of the elements of my incarnation cross in defined centers, and two of them in channels. So that's one of the interesting things for me. And so there's a lot of interesting things you can get out of like who has points of their incarnation cross in undefined centers, who has them in defined centers, and so on. Let's just catch up on the chat a little bit here. And Nancy said, question, could our nodes also nurture us to be our sun Earth? Could the movie stage support us to pick up tools and lessons to be the ultimate natural version? I just want to comment on this for a minute because I have thought a lot about this, and it's something that is very fascinating to me. So Steve Rhodes analyzes the sun Earth as who you are, and particularly when you look at the substructure, what makes you happy, how reactive you are, and your resilience, basically how fragile you are, but also how sensitive in a more positive way of looking at it. So that's the sun Earth. That's who you really are. The nodes are the kind of people you're drawn to. What puts them in a good mood? You might not be very competitive at all, but love competitive people. You might not be very reactive, but love very reactive people, or vice versa. You might be super resilient and love really vulnerable people, or you might be really vulnerable and fragile, but love really resilient people. And all of these combinations are possible. Now, what I've seen doing these kinds of analyses for multiple years, again and again and again, is a sad, tremendous, devastating lack of self-love in people. I have seen couples who are only put in a good mood through hedonistic pleasure and feeling good. They don't have a competitive bone in their body. They only have feeling tones in their sun Earths. That's from the solar plexus, right? Tones 5 and 6. And yet their nodes have splenic tones, tones 1 and 2. What is this story? This story is them criticizing each other for not making enough money. Their story is criticizing each other for not working hard enough. Their story is criticizing themselves and a lack of self-love for wishing they could be more competitive, trying to be more competitive, putting themselves under more pressure. See what I'm saying? Like the nodes have become the sort of ideal that they're trying to live up to and can't, and the excuse for why they don't love themselves. What I preach to them as a color 3 priest, what I preach is basically the value of self-love and realizing that they need to love themselves for not being competitive, not being splenic, not going after material success in this world, not knowing how to make a bunch of money, not knowing how to handle high-pressure deadlines, not knowing how to handle mission-critical life or death situations. That's not what they came here to do. Other people came here to do that, and they are attracted to those people. But they're in a relationship together. They both have feeling tones. They both have nodes with spleen tones. They're at each other's necks. Why doesn't he get a job? Well, she said she was going to get money from that, and then she never got the money. Well, he's not working hard enough. Well, she's not a go-getter. Well, he lacks ambition. Well, this is the terror of trying to be your nodes. And what are you really trying to be with your nodes? You're trying to be a cohort of people that you incarnated with over a 3.5 month period that are basically the environment. You're trying to be the environment. In fact, Ra talked about how horrified he was when he got into photographing models and things like that, and how the models were called furniture. That they were actually called furniture. Oh, where's the furniture? Oh, they're over there. Get the furniture. Human furniture. And Ra said he didn't want to ever be furniture, but he would sometimes make dark jokes like, time to go out and see the furniture show. It's time to go out to the furniture convention. And what he meant by that was to go out to a large crowd of people who essentially are not differentiating or individuating because they do not love who they are. They are trying so hard to be their nodes, aka to be their environment. So I think, the default configuration is that the nodes are the environment. We can strive to try to live up to these impossible standards and ideals that they present to us. We can try so hard to be them. And that is really the pain of the world. And when we develop self-love, we stop trying to be that. To have feeling tones and to have nodes and spleen, you have to stop trying to succeed materially. Stop trying to make $1 million on the stock market. Stop trying to be in a life or death situation like a brain surgeon or a military captain or an airline pilot. You're not designed for those, and that is part of the limitation. And people can say, well, that's a limiting belief. Anyone can be an airline pilot. Yeah, but are they going to be happy? Are they going to be put in a good mood having a life or death situation, having someone else's life in their hands? Well, the problem is, if their sun earths are in feeling tones, they're designed to be hedonists and to not be under that pressure and stress. But if their nodes are in splenic tones, they're going to have an illusion that they need to try to be successful in the material plane. And the sooner they give that up and develop the self-love, the sooner they find true happiness in this world. But it's very hard to do. It's almost that the mind wants to be everything. It's like personally affronted if you tell it can't do something. And yeah, if a kid wants to be an astronaut, you encourage them and you say, yes, be an astronaut. But if an adult tells you you want to be an astronaut, you say, well, how? How are you going to do that? This is actually a line of thought from Adam Phillips. He's a British psychoanalyst who really talks about the need to accept limitation in life. And I think that's how we get to self-love, is by embracing limitation, not by running away from it. And in that running away, there's only one place to go: towards the nodes, towards the environment, towards being what you're not. I am in the environment. I am not the environment. Obviously, we have activation from the nodes that makes it a little confusing for people because they say, but wait a minute, aren't the nodes also part of you? Yes, it's the part of you that connects to your environment. It's the part of you that is the environment for other people. It's the part of you that tells you what your ideal environment is and who you're ideally meant to be with. But it's not you in the sense that the sun is you in terms of your role, the personality sun, the point of your incarnation cross, the life purpose, and the role you play in the greater collective through profile between the personality and the designed sun earths. Comment from Rachel, she's all respect nodes and have been called furniture based on that movie by People, Soylent Green. And then now is commenting that she has personality feeling nodes, design splenic nodes, and sun earth splenic. Yeah, so I think it's just realizing that if you have splenic nodes, you can really think you need to be some hyper type A person to succeed in the world. And the real self-love is accepting that you might not have to be as materially successful as you think, but you're probably drawn to very materially successful people, right? So I think that's what the nodes, that's the secret of the nodes, is that when you really love yourself, you don't have to be that other thing. Like I've even felt like gone from like jealousy or envy of others to feeling grateful that I am who I am and kind of enjoying them getting their life. Like it's a weird thing. I think part of it's just like growing older, but it's kind of like, when you're younger, you want to have the adventure, and then you're older and you can like vicariously enjoy someone else having the adventure. It's the same kind of thing here. Like when you're identifying with the nodes, you want to be that successful person. When you realize you don't necessarily need to be, obviously in Now's case, she still has, personality splenic nodes. Yeah, so you're still going to want to succeed materially using your mind. I always tell people with personality spleen nodes to give human design readings because it's basically a way of getting paid to use your mind and can make you really happy. To just use your mind for money, things like that. But okay, well, anyway, not to derail too much into that, but I do think, looking at the nodes and the Sun Earth, I mean, this is such a profound thing just by itself. Ra, of course, called these the cross of life, the horizontal and the vertical. So let's wrap up for today, and then next week I'd love to read a little more from Jan van den Berg's What About Planets in Human Design, as well as Richard Tarnas's Archetypal Astrology, and then we can maybe talk about some of our own planetary placements. What are our channels defined by? What planets are they designed by? And we could also, look at other placements like Personality Venus. Now suggest resonance mapping. Yeah, resonance mapping is a very advanced topic where, almost the way to do that is kind of as a series where we literally just it's like the better way to do it would be like as a reading group, because we do have a lot of magic square analysis done by James Alexander in previous catalysts and also just previous signpost events. So I can definitely get you some of those, but in that case, it's a little more like looking at a body graph and just doing the analysis, and there's a lot of interesting nuances there. I think some of those are actually on the website, so I know it's not very well organized, but it's this is the info. And I think those should actually be on there on the actual signpost dashboard. But to actually learn resonance mapping, we would pretty much just be doing a reading group. We could definitely do that. I'm not opposed to it. I just think it's such a deep topic that it's hard to just dip your toes in. It would more be like what we did for base theory, where we spent like 5 weeks on it. I'm not opposed to that. I do think personality and design resonance mapping, aka magic square, are very fascinating and very deep. We may even just end up there organically if we spend a few weeks in planets, because eventually we'll just get to those keynotes. We kind of started with the Black Book, Ra's first set of keynotes. Now we're looking at the Rudd Ra keynotes. Next week we can look at the Jan van den Berg planetary keynotes that he's accumulated from various things Ra has said. We can bring in the archetypal astrology, and then eventually, maybe in 2 or 3 weeks, if we're still having fun looking at planets, we could bring in some of the magic square keynotes, and that would be kind of a nice progression, so we kind of see the development of engagement with the planets over time. Yeah, thanks. I agree, Ricky. This is a fun direction. I like these multi-week series. It gives us something to kind of really dig into. Wonderful. Well, I will see you tomorrow, Lisita. Everyone else, I wish you were here in Santa Fe. You could join us in the park. But until then, we'll continue to chat online. And thanks for everyone for coming tonight. We'll continue next week with more exploration of the planets. Yeah, thank you so much, Ricky. Thanks, everyone. Have a great night. Yeah, thanks, Liz.